Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on the Big Blue YouTube channel. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Your 0-2 Giants face the 1-1 Cleveland Browns this week, game that the Giants really desperately need to win if their season isn't going to go completely off the rails. I don't want to know how ugly it's going to be in MetLife Stadium Thursday night against the Cowboys if the Giants walk into the building 0-3. But got to play the Cleveland Browns first. And here to help me break down that game is Jared Mueller of SB Nation's Dogs by Nation. Jared, thank you so much for a few minutes.
Absolutely, Ed. It's good to see you on a screen after some time in Indy together.
Yeah, that's the last time I saw you was in Indy. I think with those bright orange glow in the dark sneakers on.
Hey, listen, you gotta draw attention one way or another, and I don't have the loudest personalities. Let's address it that way.
Oh well, but everybody sees you coming.
That's right.
So, all right. So let's talk about this matchup, and let me start simply with this. The Browns, they more or less lose a lopsided game to Dallas in week 1, eke out a win over the Jaguars in week 2. How do you feel about the Browns at this point, about the start to their 2024 season?
That's a great question. Unsure is probably the best way to describe it. Deshaun Watson didn't look like he knew how to play quarterback in week 1. He would take a 3-step drop and at step 2 already be leaving the pocket. And then in week 2 looked a lot crisper. And so that's a really helpful thing. Obviously, in a quarterback driven league, you need a quarterback who looks like he knows how to play football and knows how to play inside the structure of an offense. And so we saw a little of that in week 2. Unfortunately, injuries on the offensive line are really the biggest concern right now. So technically, the Browns have 3 starting offensive tackles. 2 of them have not played in the first 2 weeks, and the third, who has played in the first 2 weeks, may not play this week. And so there is about a 12 offensive tackle combination possibility for week 3, and that's really made it difficult. The Browns have not been able to run the ball. Protection has been pretty poor. And so that's really kind of, interestingly, the side of the football that's been most affected by injuries, even though the defense has put 7 players on injured reserve, including a couple starters and key contributors. They haven't been as affected. It's a deeper side of the ball. And really, when you have a Myles Garrett, a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and 3 really, really good cornerbacks, everything else tends to work itself out. So it's been a really interesting start to the season. Not to be mean, but Browns fans are excited to have the Giants and Redskins coming up. I'm sorry, Commanders coming up on their schedule.
Yeah, no offense taken. Let's put it that way, because it's understandable, why teams would quote unquote look forward to having the Giants on the schedule. Can you, before we move off that topic, can you go a little bit more in depth on the offensive tackle injuries? I know we're talking about Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin, and DeJuan Jones. Just go a little more in depth on those, because the Giants defense is built around 3 players. It's built around Dexter Lawrence in the middle, who is a problem. I don't care who you try to put in front of him. And it's also built around Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns, the 2 edge defenders who honestly have not had nearly the impact in the first 2 weeks that they need to have if that defense is going to be successful. So injured offensive tackle sounds like a good thing from a Giants perspective.
It does. So I'm early in my film look at New York, but I was surprised statistically looking at Burns and Thibodeau and the lack of impact from them. So Jedrick Wills was injured last year. They thought he would come back for the playoffs, and somehow now in week 3 he may not be ready to go. So a knee injury for Jedrick Wills that happened late last season, last 5-6 games of the year. Jack Conklin went out in week 1 of last season with a pretty significant knee injury. He's had a history of those. And so he's over a year removed from that injury and right around a year removed from his surgery, still has not come back yet. So it's been interesting as they've been trying to work through all of that. Jed Wills is the starting left tackle, or is supposed to be on his 5th-year option, really has been disappointing as the 10th overall pick, the first round pick from GM Andrew Berry back in 2020. So it looks like Jack Conklin was kind of being groomed to start at left tackle the first 2 weeks of the season, and then he just wasn't able to play. So that put James Hudson III at left tackle, and honestly, it shows the lack of depth around the league. But at the end, again, if the Browns had a good 4th tackle, they probably would have traded him for a 2nd or a 1st-round pick at this point in time. So right now, it's possible that Jack Conklin is the likely left tackle starter this week. He has not played left tackle since college. He is in about his 10th season in the league. To tell you how excited we are for Jack Conklin to play left tackle over James Hudson tells you a lot. But DeJuan Jones was in and out of the lineup last week, did not practice on Wednesday. He has been their starting right tackle, a hulking figure, a 4th-round pick who fell, just some work ethic concerns, all that. Had a great rookie year. Really does a great job of shutting down speed rushers. It has the power to overcome them, the TJ Watts of the world. Can get taken a little bit by some players that are great with their hands. But he is out with a knee injury, and based on the way he talked, there is a chance he will play this week, but it seems more likely that he might miss a couple of weeks. So we could see James Hudson at left tackle, Jack Conklin at right tackle this week. Next week, we could see Jed Wills back. It is absolutely 100 different combinations. None of them are really good options going up against those 2 defensive ends, outside linebackers. So it is really where, as I say, the Browns could be excited for the Giants. The Giants could be excited for those edge rushers to go after whatever is left at the tackle position.
Yeah, it's it's interesting because that's a matchup, as I said, that the Giants need production from those players. And to this point, and it's early, but to this point, haven't gotten it yet. We have to talk about you mentioned Deshaun Watson a little bit, but the farther into the Deshaun Watson era of the Browns that you guys get, how much worse does that trade and that mega, fully guaranteed contract that they foolishly gave him, how much worse does that look the deeper that you get into it?
It's interesting. They always, and the Browns fans always knew that the off the field stuff was always going to look bad. And the hope was there'd be an offset there, right?
Right.
The Hannibal Lecter conversation about if, he'd be considered having an eating issue if he was a great defensive lineman. The reality is it's really deflated the Browns fan base. It's really created an opportunity in a situation where really it seems like the best hope is that he gets suspended and the Browns can get out from most of that contract. That seems like the best hope. Even last week, it was adequate quarterback play. It was nothing special. It was nothing unique. There's still concerns about leaving the pocket, good footwork, taking extra sacks, those kind of things. It feels like the Browns sold their souls as well as their salary cap for a player that only would make sense if he was elite. And he's been less than elite, injured, and suspended. And now, and I'll just be honest, this is, I don't know how Giants fans' brains work, but Browns fans pretty much assume at this point, Watson is going to start to look good over the next few weeks and then be suspended by the NFL. And so Browns fans are going to get excited about his play. He's going to get above adequate. He's going to be good. He's going to look like a player who can lift this really talented roster, and then he'll be suspended. Like, that is really the expectation at this point in time. And to be honest, given what the Browns did with the contract, the NFL has no reason to do them any favors right now. And I don't expect them to. And so that's really the expectation at this point, is that as bad as it has been, somehow it is going to get worse.
Yeah, the it's tough because I mean I know that there's there's a lot of negativity these days in the Giants fan base, even though they made the playoffs 2 years ago. It's been a lot more bad than it's been good for the last 10 or 11 years. And it sort of sounds like Cleveland fans are in that same place where they're sort of expecting the other shoe to drop all the time.
And the hardest thing is the rest of the roster is really good. Kevin Stefanski is a really good head coach. Jim Schwartz is a really good defensive coordinator. So it's harder because you look at this roster, and now Baker Mayfield would have never become the quarterback he is in Tampa if the Browns hadn't traded him and paid most of his contract. Carolina hadn't cut him. He got to the Rams. You know, all the things that happened. He's even basically admitted that he needed kind of that kick in the pants. But Baker Mayfield, as is now, makes this a Super Bowl contender. Last year, Joe Flacco, who, by the way, he's been glorified for everything he did. He's a turnover machine. He was who Joe Flacco's always been. Big plays, both good and bad, ruined the playoff game against the Texans. But Joe Flacco at least makes you feel like there's a ceiling, right? And so, yeah, it's even more frustrating because Browns fans for 30 years, basically since the return in 1999, have not had talented rosters. So it's always been about the draft, what might be, what could be down the road. Now it's literally just give us competent quarterback play. And this is a team that could at least make the AFC Championship game in a really good conference. So that makes it almost more frustrating that if the roster was bad and they had done everything with Deshaun Watson, this roster is really, really loaded.
But if the quarterback was a reasonable facsimile of what they hoped they were getting, you know, then you have something that at least in the minds of ownership probably justifies it.
100%.
Talk about that defense a little bit. Obviously, not the performance you guys wanted in week 1, better in week 2, but a really good unit, a really good group. You just talk about the key guys on that group and how good that unit is.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is the Browns defense goes too deep on the defensive line, which is why they can have some injuries and not really have a problem. You start with the defensive ends. You have Myles Garrett, who is just elite defensive player of the year last year. His get off, his strength, his length, his ability to bend the edge is unlike anything I've really ever seen at that size and that height. Zadarius Smith is just that key veteran who knows when to kind of push the pocket, knows when to use his hands, cause some problems. Alex Wright is a player that Giants fans probably have no idea who he is. 3rd round pick out of UAB a couple years ago. He's actually bigger than Myles Garrett. Now, he is not as talented anywhere near, but he really does have this size and ability to really make plays. And so he comes in kind of as your 3rd defensive end. But beyond him is Ogbo Okoronkwo, who is just a pass rusher. You have this smaller, speedy pass rusher and this hulking other defensive end behind Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith. On the inside, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Maurice Hurst is hurt, so you won't see him. But you got these defensive tackles. So it really starts with that front 4 that really can go 6, 7, 8 deep at times. Behind them, Jordan Hicks, 2 games in, signed over from Minnesota, really has been a little bit more electric and athletic than Anthony Walker. But next to him is really the star in the second unit. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a heat-seeking missile with the football IQ that you cannot block him. You cannot square him up. I don't care how good you are. You are not going to square him up. He is going to get around you. And at times, if you're off balance, he is going to go through you, even though he's not the biggest linebacker. So he could play safety. He can play in coverage. He will rush the passer. You will see him blow up screens, run plays. He is all over the place. And then he has a version of himself at strong safety in Grant Delpit, who is very similar. He's going to play up to the line of scrimmage, all of that. And then 3 cornerbacks, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, and Greg Newsome, who all are 1B kind of players at different ways. Newsom's going to play a little bit more inside. The interesting thing for the Giants and anybody that plays the Browns is they are very easy to take advantage of if you are good and disciplined at taking advantage of man press coverage. And when I say aggressive, it's not about blitzing. They will blitz every once in a while, but everything is pressed. And so if you're running counters, if you're running some screens, if you've got a late release player that JOK is supposed to be covering, but he green dog blitzes and you release that player. If you run a lot of kind of over routes and crossing routes to go that are moving away, you can really take advantage of this defense. If you go against some of your tendencies, normally this happens here and now they take a second move. The Browns are going to make mistakes. And against the Dallas Cowboys, it really wasn't a bad day. It was a couple big plays, and then they were just behind, and Dallas and a punt return and those kind of things really kind of took advantage. So really talented. If you can't take advantage of what the Browns do, like the Jacksonville Jaguars can't, they will shut you down. If you can, like the Houston Texans did, you can run roughshod over them and use all of their aggressiveness and speed to your advantage.
Couple of matchup questions for you on that side of the ball. Andrew Thomas, in my mind, is maybe, and all due respect to Trent Williams and everybody else, but when Andrew Thomas is healthy, which he is right now, there's not a better pass blocking left tackle in the NFL. We can quibble about, run block here and there, whatever, but there's not a better pass blocking left tackle in the league. I'm curious about the Myles Garrett matchup. Mm-hmm. Will the Browns keep Myles Garrett away from Andrew Thomas? Will they just match them up and let those guys go? Do they move him around, or what are we going to see?
Yeah, you'll see Myles Garrett everywhere. Part of that is Myles has the ability to make that decision as the play starts. And so you'll see him a little bit slower to kind of figure out where he's going to go on a play, looking at where the running back, where the tight end is, all of that. He doesn't. It's really interesting. If I was better at film, I still think I wouldn't be able to figure out why he makes some of the decisions he makes. Sometimes he likes to go one-on-one because there's no tight end or running back on the side. Sometimes he likes to be over there because he can split, and the tackle and the tight end just don't communicate really well, and he can take advantage of that. But you're also going to see Myles Garrett stand up as a linebacker. You'll see him on the inside as a 3 technique or a 5 technique in that kind of wide 9. You're going to see Myles Garrett really all over the place, and that's what makes Darius Smith really a perfect partner. Smith has seen it all. He's been around long enough that he's able to adapt really, really quickly to whatever Myles really wants to do, and they just trust Myles with that. So I think you'll see them matched up, a fourth or so of the snaps. But you'll see Garrett deciding how he thinks he can take over the game and what's best for the team. And Jim Schwartz really allows that with him in a lot of the ways.
The other matchup I wanted to ask you about is Malik Nabers against that secondary. Now, the Giants targeted Malik Nabers 18 times last week. Now, understand that that's against the Washington Commanders, who bluntly didn't have a cornerback capable of dealing with Malik Nabers. They just didn't. So, I mean, I got questions this week about, well, how can the offense function if they're just going to, throw the ball to Malik Nabers 18 times? And the answer to that is, look, if you start doing something at the beginning of the game and the other team doesn't have an answer for it, why wouldn't you continue to do it? So I do not expect Malik Nabers is not getting 18 targets against the Cleveland Browns. I would expect Darius Slayton to get more targets, tight end Theo Johnson to get some targets. Wan'Dale Robinson's a really good slot receiver. I keep waiting for the Giants to figure out a way to get Wan'Dale Robinson in situations where you can get some yards after catch, because that seems to be the deal with him is they end up putting him in catch and fall down situations. But my real question with Malik Nabers is 2 parts. What do you see when you guys look at Malik Nabers? And do you think the Browns will have one defender trail him, or will they just play him with whoever he lines up in front of, and go that way?
So with Neighbors, he's really an interesting joystick type of player that is scary and dynamic. And if he was in an offense with another weapon, I think there's once the Giants figure that out, get another weapon, get Singletary is a fine running back, all of that kind of stuff. But without Barkley, without a quarterback, that I think there's some limitations, obviously. But I think Malik Nabers is really an explosive player. If Denzel Ward was fully healthy, last week he played less than 20 snaps. He was in and out in the important kind of situations. I think you would see him primarily line up against Neighbors. Ward can really kind of mirror almost any receiver, which is really impressive. Really struggles against, it's really size that can really kind of get to him. That DK Metcalf and Denzel Ward don't match up very well. So I think you're going to see a lot of Ward. I think when you're going to see the biggest plays is probably when Greg Newsome is on him, when they line him up in the slot, or when Ward is out and Newsome kind of slides outside. Newsome probably is the Browns' third best cornerback. He's really good, but he's really aggressive. He really wants to make plays. And so Neighbors' shiftiness could really affect him, especially choice and option routes. Martin Emerson is the bigger of the cornerbacks. He's good against electric receivers, but he's a little bit more physical, and I think you're probably not going to see him. He might get a little bit more of the Slayton matchup, but they don't travel. So they don't just say, you're going to travel, you're going to stay on a side. They don't really do that. It's kind of like the Myles Garrett stuff. Jim Schwartz really kind of is playing the game as the game goes on and seeing what he feels comfortable with, routes, sides, all of that kind of stuff, really evaluating how the Giants are attacking the defense. And so you're going to see a lot of different defenders on him. Inside, you also may see Cameron Mitchell. He was a late round pick last year for the Browns, but as a nickel cornerback has played pretty well out of Northwestern. So he's another name that you might be surprised if he's able to kind of stick with Neighbors a little bit. But I don't expect any one player to do that. I just think the Browns have enough talent, and the Giants maybe don't have the weapons that scare them enough. I think the Wan'Dale Robinson is, if we're talking fantasy a little bit or hopes for the Giants, I think Robinson is a really interesting player that could take advantage of what the Browns like to do, again, with his speed, especially if they don't use him like we used to use Jarvis Landry, get 4 yards and then fall down or you're out of bounds. That'd be really helpful to kind of the explosiveness that Robinson can be.
I want to go back to the other side of the ball. What do you see? What do you expect approach-wise from the Browns? It looks like they've been really pass heavy so far. So what do you expect from Cleveland on that side of the ball?
More of that. So they're trying to implement a more of a run pass option type of offense. Kevin Stefanski is a Gary Kubiak devotee, or has been, with the wide zone scheme, play action, all of that, timing and rhythm. This year they decided they're going to try to go away from that to play to Deshaun Watson's strengths. Unfortunately, that puts all the power in Deshaun Watson's hands most of the time, and oftentimes that leads to him throwing the ball. And so the other reality is right now it's kind of if you have 4 running backs, you have no running backs kind of situation. Jerome Ford can be explosive. He dances behind the line of scrimmage, much like Trent Richardson used to do back in the day. Just really doesn't hit the hole. Dante Foreman is the power back. And so you'll see some of him. Pierre Strong is out with a hamstring. So we might only see 2 running backs primarily this week, but they really are not blocking well. They lost Bill Callahan this offseason. They allowed him to go coach for his son in Tennessee. And while Andy Dickerson is a good offensive line coach, they are still transitioning overall. And when Joel Bitonio, Wyatt Teller, and Ethan Posick, 3 really good interior offensive linemen, don't look good for 2 weeks, especially in the run game, I think they're going to have to just continue to air the ball out until they get their offensive line healthy, and until Nick Chubb returns, hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks now.
What are you expecting from Chubb? I mean, it's another major leg injury that he's coming back from. At some point, there has to be some regression in his play. What are people expecting from him?
Yeah. For most of the offseason, the expectation was pretty low. Would he even play this year? And then he was squatting 680 pounds with a hurricane bar. And the hurricane bar makes it worse because it's a bendy bar. It's not the straight bar. Somehow, a few months ago, Nick Chubb was squatting 3 or 4 of me. Three, I think would be a good math on that one, with a surgically repaired knee. And he's been cutting and running. So, unfortunately for Browns fans, the expectations are is Nick Chubb will be back. He came back from his major injury in Georgia, and now he is on film looking like the Nick Chubb of old. I'm with you. Age, amount of carries, number of injuries. At some point in time, Nick Chubb has to slow down. I think the good news is his vision doesn't have to. He'll have to get back into rhythm and seeing things and all that. But his vision and his power are still going to be there. He just may not. He's never really had the huge breakaway speed. His explosive runs have come from breaking tackles and vision.
All right. So let's do this as we wrap it up. Giants are 6.5 point underdogs the last time I looked at the line. Uh, if the Giants are going to win this game, if they're going to win this game, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be probably a low scoring game that they're going to have to grind out? What are they going to have to take advantage of?
It's absolutely going to be dependent on that defensive line to wreck shop and Deshaun Watson to get out of his comfort zone really, really quickly. So if I'm the Giants, I am attacking the tackles as quickly as possible. I know it opens up some things in the back end, but I'm doing some stunts. I'm bringing a blitz. I am making Deshaun Watson think immediately about whether or not his offensive tackles can stop what New York is doing. They probably can't, even if they have some of the guys that should be starters. But I think in the end, if Deshaun Watson doesn't screw the game up, this is going to be a Browns victory. If Deshaun Watson, because of the offensive tackles or just because of his poor play, I think you could actually see a more higher scoring game than you think. But that's because the Giants defense puts their offense in position to make plays, probably even gets a score out of that. Like we really have seen that this Browns offense is either pretty bad, and this isn't just this year, it's either pretty bad or it's okay to good with Deshaun Watson behind center. And so that really kind of creates that variability there. And so it really comes down to that New York Giants defensive line. Special teams, the Browns already gave up a return for a touchdown. Bubba Ventrone is really seen as a really good special teams coordinator, but they have so many injuries that you have players that weren't even on practice squads start of the year probably are going to play on special teams. So you could see a play there as well that could really change the game.
Couldn't tell you what the Giants special teams are going to look like. They have a they after last week's disaster with Graham Gano going out on the first play of the game, they have a brand new place kicker because their primary punt returner is on IR. They have a new punt returner and who was on the roster last week, but since the Giants defense gave up 7 scores and 7 possessions, even though they were all field goals, we never got to see the punt returner catch a punt. So, so I
Ed,
couldn't tell you what that's going to look like.
I think you're missing something really positive. I am confident your punter is top 5 in the league in total yards.
Well, there is that. There is that, and Cleveland fans are familiar with Jamie Gillan, the Scottish Hammer,
Yes,
who,
sir.
by the way, over the last year to year and a half, I know that Cleveland fans probably think of him as an inconsistent young punter, um, but this guy has been really, really good for the Giants, since the beginning of the 2023 season. So there is that. But as far as the rest of the special teams, I couldn't tell you.
Well, we'll find out together probably.
Yes, we will. All right, Jared, I appreciate it. Giants fans, head over to SB Nation's Dogs by Nature if you want the Cleveland perspective on Sunday's game. So, Jared, thank you very, very much. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.